Hey guys, I'm just going to show you some quick tips in this video about the 12-inch trimmer. This is the Creative Memories 12-inch rotary trimmer. It comes with a straight blade and then has a bunch of other blades you can add to it. If you don't have this already, I would definitely recommend that you get it. It is my favorite trimmer I have ever had. It just cuts really smoothly, easy to update and replace things. The blade is protected so it's not going to hurt you or your kids or anything. It's a great one to have, and I'm going to show you just some little extra tips for using this trimmer. I'm going to cut some just scraps of cardstock to show you some of the examples. They're not necessarily current colors, so if you're curious about a certain color, you're welcome to ask. But I may not necessarily have the details because most of the stuff just comes out of my bag of scraps. So the first thing I'm going to show you, just some basics. This is how you change your blade out. This part just opens right here. The blade, the blue one is the straight blade and pops in there. Doesn't matter which way it goes with the straight blade. There are other blades down here, and I like to label my tools with my name so I know they don't get mixed in with somebody else's stuff when we're cropping. But here are the other blade options. I'm not going to really go into the decorative blades today. I'm just going to show you some basic tricks you might use with your straight blade or other blades too. But the cutting area here is a little more than 12 inches. It's about 12.5 inches. So when you have your full 12-inch paper, actually a little less than 12.5, looks like more like 12.25. You can go to either side, but there's a little bit of wiggle room if you want to go one way or the other. And then you can see where your blade is going to cut along this dotted line. Now, the mat strip does need to be replaced pretty often. You can see this was the first side of this particular strip, and there are 2 tracks on each side. So you start with it at number 1, then when number 1 is worn out, pull it out and rotate it so you're on number 2. And then when number 2 is done, you cut using the number 3 track. And again, when number 3 is worn out, which just happened on mine in the last week, I felt like I was not getting a very clean cut with it anymore. I rotated it around to number 4. So you get tons of cuts with one mat, and the replacement is only $7.50. So you don't need to replace your whole blade. Usually you don't need to replace your trimmer. You want to first rotate your little mat strip around and then replace that when you start getting cuts that are a little jagged, just not as clean and nice as you'd like. It is possible that you would sometime need to replace your straight blade, especially if you're cutting a lot of photos. It is not recommended to use this trimmer for photos, but some people do. And if your photos are larger, this trimmer may be the only option for trimming certain sizes. So if you feel like your blade is still not giving you a good cut, even when you're on a brand new spot on your mat, you might think about replacing that. But I've had mine for a long time. I got this when it first came out. I want to say that was about 4 years ago. And I use mine a ton. Plus I let lots of people use mine. Besides just all the scrapbooking and crafting I do, I use this for classes. So far, I have never had to replace my straight blade, but I have had to replace my mat strip, probably a dozen times. I replace it at least a couple times a year, just because I like to have that nice clean cut. So, the basics of this trimmer, there is a little bit of measurement in each direction from the cutting spot, from the cutting line, to the short end. You have a total of 2 full inches, and the measurements go out to 1 3/4, and then there's a little bit to the very edge, which will bring out to 2 full inches. On the other side, it measures up to 5.5. So again, the little marks measure out in 1/16 of an inch, or centimeters if you're doing centimeters. All the way out to 5 1/4, and then if you go all the way to the edge of the white plastic, it's actually 5.5 inches wide. But as you probably know, as a scrapbooker, a more common size besides 5.5 is actually 6 inches. So if you're measuring anything bigger than 5.5 inches, there is this arm that swings out from underneath. It just clips under and is easy to pull out and put back. And I love this tip that I learned from another advisor. You can just put a sticky note or some other marker on your trimmer to show you where 6 inches is. You could also do this for other sizes. So if you're cutting a lot of photo mats and want 6.5 inches, that might be another option. And I just use these little colorful tabs. So I don't leave mine on all the time. I do see people who do things a little more permanent, but you could even have multiple tabs marking multiple sizes. And with these little tabs, once you're measuring, normally with the arm, you can only measure on the one side. But if you wanted to, you could mark your measurements on the other side using the sticky notes as well. So you can have sticky notes of different lengths in different spots, maybe one on each side for the specific sizes you use most often. I like the idea of the 6 inch because that is a size I cut probably just about the most often of, I don't know, maybe not the most often, but when I'm opening up the arm for extra length to make a measurement, most often it is for 6 inches. So this paper right now is a little more than 6 inches wide. You can see where it's going to cut right here. We're on the 4th track, and it goes off just a little bit. Looks like about a quarter of an inch. Speaking of which, so 1/4 of an inch. That's what each of these little lines represents, and then the darker lines represent 1 full inch. Now toward the inside, you can see there's not actually a line where it shows the 1/4 inch mark would be, but as you get to use it, you can kind of learn that on this inside, on this longer side, the edge of the mat or the measuring area that's not marked is about the 1/4 inch here. And on this other side, it's actually the edge of the trimmer mat itself. So that's where you're at if you want 1/4 inch. Another good thing if you want 1/4 inch is to measure from your other side and then move your paper to the 1/4 inch mark. That's pretty easy to see. It makes it pretty easy to find your right spot. There are a couple other markings on here for specific and common photo sizes, but also photo mats. So if you're cutting to 3x3, that gives you a good estimate of where to line your paper up. 4x6, 4.5 by 6.5, and 5x7. There's also this 45-degree angle line, and I'll show you how I use that most often. So for me, I mean, you might want to do triangles and stuff too, but for me, the most common use of the 45-degree line is when I want to cut a banner. And what I mean by that is we're gonna get a little triangle piece in a rectangular square. And the way I do that, if you haven't seen me do this on other videos yet, is line up one edge of my paper along that 45-degree line, and then put the corner I want to cut right in the spot where the blade is gonna go. And I like to go not quite halfway, not quite to the middle of the paper, because what I don't want to do is overshoot it so I end up with a weird little X, which happens. It's not the end of the world. And we might even, I mean, that could even happen today. And then, so we were on this side, you just flip your paper over and do it exactly the same on the other side, lining up this opposite corner and your paper aligned along the 45-degree angle. And so if you have not cut one or both sides quite into the middle, you can use your scissors to finish that little bit of a cut, or I'm just gonna flip it back over and line it back up and finish that cut into the middle. So there is a white mark on the housing for the blade cartridge, and that shows you approximately where the cut starts or ends. I find that on my trimmer, it actually cuts a little bit beyond that. So I'm not sure if that's totally how it works for everybody's, but that's what I feel like happens with mine. So I don't want to take my white line all the way up to that other line that I cut, but once I'm here, I can pull that off, and then I would just clean up that inside corner with some scissors. The micro tip scissors work really great for something like this that's small. So banner, that's how I most often use that 45-degree line, but you can also cut some cute triangles that way, or if you just want things at an angle. There are lots of other tips and tricks videos. I'm just going to show you one other thing that I think is handy to know, and that is a trick using the repositionable tape. So I don't know if you can see it very well in the video, but there's one side of the trimmer, the little arm, that has kind of some non-slick or non-slip, almost sticky places. That is what holds your paper in place while you're trimming. So if you put your paper in and you want to cut it to 6 inches, I noticed one of these sides was a little jagged. Probably I punched a border. Yeah, this one. So sometimes when you use your border maker system or one of the other border pinches, you end up with an edge that's not quite smooth. So I'm going to cut off that edge so I have a smooth side. So I lined that up at the 6 inches. You want to bring your paper all the way to the guide edge that you're going to cut against, and then pull your blade or push your blade toward the side that the paper is resting against. That helps keep your paper from sliding around. So this little non-slip section also keeps your paper from moving around. However, you can see it's only on one side. So if your paper is mostly lined up on this side, that's not going to hold. And sometimes your paper is just too skinny to really be held by anything. So in that case, what I like to do is just run a little line of repositionable tape. I don't know if you can see that, but it's the little shimmery kind of dots. So that is a non-permanent adhesive. Repositionable because it can be moved around. It also rubs off whatever it gets on pretty easily. So it does sometimes do a little bit of damage to the decorative papers that are printed and that aren't like a solid color all the way through. It might take off a little bit of the coloring from the top layer, but it shouldn't do really any damage to this cardstock. So what I've done is just taped this really skinny piece down to the mat, this little mat strip, because I don't know if you can see that, but it fits right between this blade, or the arm for the blade. So neither side of this will hold that paper down, but the adhesive does. And then I can cut my really skinny strip. So I often have people complain that they don't feel like they can cut a skinny strip very evenly on this trimmer, but that is my trick to help you get a really thin, nice, even, this is about 1/8 of an inch wide piece right there. And if you always use the same line to mark, like line up your paper, you can get several of the same size. So if I wanted to, I could slide this paper over and try it again here and line it up right along that edge to try to get another one of the same width. It looks like it's almost that width anyway. So once it's like this little tiny sliver of paper coming off your paper strip or border that you're trimming, it is really hard for the blade to really grasp onto that, but we can try it and see what happens. So it's taped down again, and then I can feel it's not really catching a lot of area to cut. There is a tiny bit of play in where the blade sits, so you can get a little variation if you're rotating your wrist back and forth as you're using it. So it's good to try to keep your blade very straight and keep it in the same spot the whole time you're using it so you can get an even cut. Anyway, that was the tricks I wanted to show you. There are also other videos from Creative Memories, tool tips and things that I recommend you go watch, because there's some other cool things you should know about the trimmer, like what this little guide does and how some of the other blades work. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know. I'd be happy to do some tool tips on other tools or more things about the trimmer. Thanks.